Buonanotte, good evening. My name is Harold McLallen. I'm the founder and CEO of Steamboat Fuels. As Billy said, we're a project development enterprise based out of Houston, Texas. Project development enterprise is kind of a fancy term for a company that was formed to do a specific task, and ours was to create, develop, and design a specific piece of energy infrastructure. We're a group of professionals who came together with varied skills in order to complete this task. We all have experience in liquid fuels and an interest in the energy transition, so we chose renewable fuels as our project. I guess I can start with there we go. So that's who we are, that's what we do. We've got 3 years and a few $1 million into this already, developing this project. And so tonight I'm going to tell you about the project itself. I'm going to tell you about how we're going to pay for it. I'm going to tell you why Curacao. Tell you a little bit about the markets, and how we'll do this responsibly. And that's about it. So we're building a renewable diesel facility. Renewable diesel, I guess when the diesel engine was invented by a guy named Rudolph Diesel, there was no diesel fuel. He ran it at the World's Fair, and he ran the engine on peanut oil. So that was the first compression ignited engine. So if you're familiar with refining, which I know a lot of people here are, when you distill a barrel of oil at different temperatures, you get different products. You get gasoline, jet fuel, diesel fuel, kerosene, heavy fuel oil. The thing about renewable feedstocks, such as animal fats, used cooking oils, vegetable oils, when you distill those, they all distill down into diesel fuel. So about 95% of our product, feedstock, will become diesel fuel directly. This is diesel fuel that is exactly the same chemically to petroleum diesel, only its life cycle emissions are quite a bit lower. So anyone who's familiar with refining will recognize our facility when it's built and they walk through it. It basically comes down to a pre-treater unit, which I'll talk about a little bit later, a hydrotreater unit, which is the same as a hydrotreater unit you would find in any refinery in the United States. We have the marine infrastructure of jetties and terminals. We'll move everything in and out in MR tanker vessels. We'll have a tank storage terminal, and we'll have a hydrogen production facility. Our hydrogen production facility will not require natural gas or any fossil fuels. We'll come off and take our off gases and our naphtha, which are all made from renewable resources, to make a very green hydrogen to operate our plant with. So what do? We start with bringing in feedstocks. And in this case, our feedstock will primarily be beef tallows, lards, and used cooking oils. So a tallow or a lard is an animal fat that's been processed. McDonald's used to use beef tallow to cook its French fries back when they were really, really good. Used cooking oil was used to cook French fries, and lard is, it's the same as your grandmother cooked with making pies and stuff. So when anything's grown in the ground, it can pick things up from the soil, heavy metals, phosphorus, chlorides. So the first thing we do when this stuff comes in is we take it to a pre-treatment facility. And what we do there is we just take these materials, we refine them by taking out the phosphorus and the heavy metals and all of that could damage our refining equipment. And then it moves over to our process. And at this point in time, anyone who's worked in a refinery would recognize this process. So it's a hydrotreater, isomerization reactor, and naphtha separators. When that's done, it's all going into the tanks and being shipped. All of our product is destined for Northern Europe or potentially the United States. It would be way too expensive to use it here. The government support and credits for these products make it a very high value product in the Europe and North American markets. So a little bit about our product. We've talked about the feedstock. We talk about making renewable diesel. We've talked a little bit about what it is and where it'll go. One interesting thing is our client wants us to make Arctic diesel that can run above the Arctic Circle, and Curacao is the perfect place to do that. So we'll be making that product. We've talked about importing, pre-treating, producing the diesel. The life cycle emission of the product we make will be 75 to 85% less than petroleum diesel. So that's why this is key for the energy transition. We're moving to electrification, we're moving to hydrogen power, we're doing a lot of other things, but we're gonna have need for diesel fuel in shipping, in construction equipment, heavy haul transport for some time to come. So this is a much better way for the world to get that liquid fuel. And again, this is not a biodiesel. A biodiesel is a product that has to be blended and only a certain percentage can go into fuel. We're making real diesel fuel. Project financing. So people ask why Curacao is the most popular question I get. But the second question is always, Harold, how are you going to pay for this? You don't look like a billionaire. And you would be correct. So we've teamed up with Macquarie Bank. Macquarie is an Australian bank. They're one of the largest financial institutions in the world. So $1 billion sounds like a lot of money and the hardest part to do. But in working through a project like this, that first $1 million, that's the hardest checks you'll ever write. You know, when we sat down and we started working on this, we had no idea if it would succeed or not. And if it didn't succeed, those first millions, we were just raking them into a big pile and gonna set fire to it. Because it was a binary result. We're either gonna succeed or not. So that first little bit of money is always the hardest part of a project like this. Once we get going and we establish ourselves, the banks will come and finance us. We have currently, the project set up right now to be 70% debt and 30% equity. Macquarie Bank has written us a term sheet and letters of intent for our 70% financing. They were all here on the island 2-3 weeks ago. Came down to see the site. Macquarie Capital, which for regulatory rules is a separate entity, is going to provide us with $300 million in equity. One of the other things we have to do in financing this is we have to have working capital. I mean, we're talking about buying close to $1 billion a year of animal fat and used cooking oil. So it's not just that first $1 billion to build it. We've got to have that money to come in and finance our trade and sell our fuel out. So Macquarie's also put together a sales agreement for us, an FSA, to finance that. And why would they do that? Well, we have a good business plan. We've structured our contracts so that we have a contracted cash flow. And we're in line in the energy transition. The banks and the private equity firms these days are all looking for ESG investments, you know, energy transition, environment, social, governments. So we had a wide pool to choose from, and we've been quite happy with Macquarie. Why Curacao? Why not Curacao? You know, I think about Curacao and when we came here. Now, I'm from the United States. They call us, back in my grandfather's time, the arsenal of democracy. We built planes and ships and tanks in a way nobody in the world had ever seen it done before. But none of that would have gone anywhere or been effective if the people of Curacao hadn't been making the fuel to power them. So in Curacao and Aruba, you look and you think refining is in the very fiber of this nation. It's been here a long time. It's been an important part of your country and your culture. And that made it a great reason to start looking here. But when we got here, we found a lot more. We found great land that was perfect for our operations at Buombai. There was existing marine infrastructure that we could leverage to become more capital efficient. We found a very experienced and broad workforce. The jobs in our refinery are going to be no different than the jobs in the existing refinery. I'd also like to pause and tell you that through this whole process, we've been very cognizant of the desire to restart the Isla refinery. And we have planned our project and our company around not interfering with that. So we're not taking anything today that would interfere with the reoperation of Isla refinery. It's purely organic growth. We don't compete with them in markets. We don't compete with them for feedstock, and we're not competing with them for infrastructure. So that's been really important for us. We also found favorable tax treatment here. In the existing law, we're not asking for any special tax treatment at all, except for what exists in Curaçao already. And we found commercial laws that you could live with. These are, your laws are based on the Netherlands and the EU, and you have a long established history of being a place that you can do business reliably. Freight and tariff advantages. This is our favorite part. We always like to talk about optionality. We want as many options for shipping, buying, and selling as we can get. And so when you look at Curaçao, it's unique. In the tariffs, as we look, we have free trade status with the European Union and the United States. So with the European Union, we have the LGO program, which allows us to ship tariff-free our fuel into Europe. If we were making this in the United States, we couldn't get that status. And through the Caribbean Basin Trade Initiative and the Caribbean Trade Partnership Act, we get free tariff access into the United States. If we were to bring in our feedstocks from South America into the United States, we'd pay a prevailing tariff on those feedstocks. But if we bring them into Curaçao and we convert them here and make them into a different code, then we get tariff-free for our fuel into the US. So that was very important for us and gives us a strong economic advantage. We also have a freight advantage here. If you look at where Curaçao sits and we talk about wanting to bring in feedstocks from South America or Asia, we're in a natural position marine-wise. And it makes a lot of sense for us financially. It's cheaper for us to pick up a load of soybean oil in Buenos Aires, ship it to Curaçao, take it through the canal, go to Los Angeles, than it is for us to load those same feedstocks on a train in Kansas and ship them to the West Coast. So there's a lot of economic advantage in that. Economic growth for Curaçao. We will be really good for the country. We're talking about 500 refinery jobs, and those are all kinds of jobs. Those are operators in the plants, accountants, human resources, IT, trades, truck drivers, warehousemen. Every job that you can think of that exists at Isla, we'll have at our place. We'll have over $1.5 billion in sales from our fuel. Our fuel in Europe these days is worth between $9 and $10 a gallon. So, and we're going to make 180 million gallons a year. Well, at peak construction, will be well over 1,000 workers on the site. The construction period will go for over 2 years. The other thing is we'll use the same companies that Isla uses for their support. You know, we're a newer place. We won't have as much maintenance work, but we'll have shutdowns and turnarounds, and we'll need all the services and tradesmen that have traditionally serviced the Isla refinery. So we should have a nice knock-on effect to the economy. And we're a green energy company. You know, this is participating in the energy transition. And, you know, I tell people, I said, you know, we've all worked in the past on the refineries that our grandfathers built, but we're building a refinery here that'll be for our grandchildren to work at. We think we'll be supplying good, well-paying jobs for decades to come. Health, safety, and the environment. When we have permitted the first part of our project, which was the pre-treater units. We're the first company that ever went through the new EPP, environmental permitting policy, which was set out by ministerial decree after the Clean Air Everywhere court actions. It was prescribed, and Royal Haskoning put together the program. We went through a very extensive and expensive process to do that, and we're going to continue to do that. You know, one of the things when you're getting your money from a big bank like Macquarie, they have their own compliance issues. So even if we didn't have to do this permitting work for the government, we would have to do it for the bank. And so we do studies on the soil analysis, hazardous substances. We do a noise study, air emissions, odor, fire and safety, solid waste disposal, and water treatment. We had zero in our plan. We're putting in our own water treatment facility to recycle water. We'll have no effluents to the ocean. We're very clean in terms of greenhouse gases and emissions, and we minimize and have made plans to minimize our solid waste. So we also have to do social compliance. So we'll be doing studies on our social impact on the neighboring communities and the island in general. So we've approached things in a very responsible way. I think anybody who's worked with us on the project could tell you that. And as proof, we actually have a permit from the GMN for our operation. So we'll be amending that for the expanded project, but that'll be taking place over the next 6 months or so. And that's really about our project. You know, when it comes to why Curacao, I would like to take a moment and recognize somebody who's become a very close friend and a valued associate, and that's Gregory Moreno. Greg has been an incredible advocate for your country, and we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be able to have gotten this far without him. So, Greg, thank you very much. Well, I went over a lot without trying to get too far into chemistry and bore you all to death with the parts of it I like. So I guess at this time, Billy, we'll open it up for questions. Do we have a microphone for the audience or anything?